Louisiana-style red beans and rice, oyster and artichoke bisque, Louisiana jambalaya. Welcome to Dishing It Out Louisiana Style. I'm Angela Bertone, your host. In Louisiana, we love to cook, we love to eat, and we love to talk about it. In Louisiana, we not only cook with our hands, we cook with our hearts. Some people call that Southern hospitality. We call that a way of life. Are you ready to get started today? We're going to have meatloaf, mashed potatoes, and smothered cabbage with a little bit of bacon. So let's get started by turning on our potatoes. I already have them diced and in a pot of water. We're going to salt that for you so you can just kind of see, you know how I don't measure. And one of the things I wanted to show you is we're just going to peel a potato and dice it, mainly so that for those young women out there who don't spend much time in the kitchen and really want to learn and are a little bit intimidated, we just want to show you how to use a potato peeler. You could also use a knife if you don't have one, a potato peeler that is. And there are potato peelers that instead of pulling them to you, you would actually push away. So whatever makes you feel comfortable. When I was a little girl, my daddy would require we peel potatoes with a knife just so we would learn. And he would pick at us and tell us if we peeled it too much, he'd make us peel the peelings. Well, he really didn't. He just told us that so we wouldn't waste the potato. So I really just want to show you size. Whenever I make homemade mashed potatoes, I'm just going to cut my potato in half or close to in half. And then again, and then I'm going to dice them, trying to keep them about even as far as the size. It just kind of lets you see approximately the size. And you want to kind of keep them uniform so that they all cook evenly. Let me go ahead and cut the rest of them up. And then we're going to get that wonderful meatloaf, and I'll tell you a story about my terrible meatloaf episode of the past. Don't pick at me too bad because you might end up doing the same thing. We're going to bring those to a bowl and turn them down. I'm not going to cover them because they're full of starch, and if you cover it, it'll boil over. So what we're going to do now is we're going to get this meatloaf going. And just to prepare you for food for thought, we have 3 words today. We have meatloaf, we have mashed potatoes, and we have cabbage. And meatloaf is where you take some type of ground meat. Back in the day, it could be pork or chicken or whatever, and you would form it into a loaf to bake it like a loaf of bread. The other one is mashed potatoes. Mashed means to mix together. Believe it or not, potato meant earth apple. And then cabbage meant head or kaput. And kaput means it is finished. So we're not finished yet, we're just getting started. So I've got my ground meat. I'm gonna put in some minced garlic. Now I put it in my garlic press and it's very, very fine. Now I have some red bell pepper. I love the flavor of a bell pepper in a meatloaf. It just makes such a difference. So I would choose red, yellow, or orange if I was you. We have some finely chopped up onions. And what I did was I left my celery here out just so I can show you, just chop it up a little bit. And I want this super fine so that I don't have chunks. Okay, that looks good. Now these are some garden fresh eggs, and I'm gonna put 3. Now I already have measured out, and you know on mine it's not really measured, it's just some. My breadcrumbs and my Romano cheese. I'm gonna guess that this is about 1/4 cup of Romano cheese. And this looks to be like about 1 cup of breadcrumbs. Maybe a little bit more than a cup. We're gonna mix this together. Well, let me do this. Let me get my hands rinsed, and I wanna season it before I mix it up. So give me just a second. This is real simple seasonings. We're gonna put salt, black pepper, and garlic. And I like fresh ground pepper. So simple. And you would think that you would never mess this up, but when I first got married, this is one of the things I did not know how to cook. So my meatloaf was like absolutely the worst ever in history, and I'll prove it to you by the story that I'm going to tell you. This is my granulated garlic. But I made the meatloaf, and no matter what I did, it was either too firm or just tasted bad. So a friend of mine gave me a recipe, and she said, oh, this is foolproof, it's so easy. You are gonna love this. Well, I made this meatloaf, and I kid you not, the dog nor the cat would eat my meatloaf. So for years, I promised my husband I wouldn't even try. My husband's grandmother, Mama Annie, she used to make spaghetti and meatballs every Sunday. And we'd go over there and she'd have homemade bread and the family would come and visit. But it dawned on me, I could just make them just like Mama makes her meatballs. So that's what I did. I made a meatloaf just like Mama makes meatballs. The only difference is she did not include bell peppers in hers. And one of the things we're going to do, we're going to check the texture of it. If it's not quite moist enough, we're going to add a little bit of water to it. Now, I just want it to form really well, and I want it to be moist. And this is a very lean beef, so we don't want it to be dry. And I'm not going to put much, maybe a tablespoon. Okay, that's it. That's all we have to do. We're going to put this in our meatloaf pan, 375 for 45 minutes, and then it's going to rest when we take it out. Now I'm going to stuff it with some provolone cheese. So I'm going to put part of the mixture in the bottom. I'm just going to kind of form a little well in my meatloaf so that the cheese will kind of stay in there and not squish out between the sides of the meat. So this is just provolone cheese, or as my granddaughter likes to call it, circle cheese. When I get done putting everything together, I am going to put plain old ketchup on top. There we have meat formed in a loaf pan. Okay, that's a lot of ketchup. But we're just going to spread it out. One of the things that the ketchup does is kind of hold the moisture in. And I've made this with deer meat, wonderful. As a matter of fact, I wanted to do that for you today, but we had eaten all the deer meat. Okay, you guys, there we go. Meatloaf, we'll go ahead and put that in the oven, 375. And when we come back, we're gonna put our cabbage together. We'll get our potatoes mashed up, and we'll talk about why this dish makes a good dish for Easter. We'll be right back. Okay, so we have cabbage, onions, we have some bacon that I've already fried. And you want it kind of crunchy so it just breaks. You don't want the chewy kind. So make sure you cook it, my daddy would call it render it really well so it just breaks in pieces, because we're going to put that in our cabbage in just a few minutes. So we'll go ahead and get our onions chopped, and we're going to chop it fairly large, almost the size of what we're going to do our cabbage. And I'm going to go ahead and get my fire going. This is the same skillet that I actually cooked my bacon in. And if you'll look, you'll see the bacon drippings on the bottom of my pan. And that's also going to give you some good flavor. I love the sweet flavor of the onion, the sweetness of the cabbage, and then the saltiness of that bacon is going to go really good together. So you see they're good and chunky. And that's about an onion and a quarter. And you'll see these onions will begin to pull that dripping of the fat off of the bottom of the pan. We're going to turn that down. Just smothered cabbage. Now we're going to go ahead, and it's easy for me to slice the cabbage on the sides because the heart is, sometimes can be pretty hard. So I'm just going to use a big knife and go down the side, slice it off, and then I'm just going to go right around the heart and do the same thing on all sides. Now what I want to do is I want my cabbage to be small in little bite-sized pieces. I don't want it long, like when I put it in my mouth, I don't want it dropping down on my chin. So I'm going to chop it about the size that you saw me chop the onions, maybe just a little bit bigger. Now the Hungarian settlement is right up the road from where I live, and my sister married into a Hungarian family, and they make something called Cabbage, I think is how you say it. And it's real similar to this, but they put a whole pound of bacon and they cook their cabbage with that bacon and all the bacon fat for like a really long time, maybe a couple of hours or so, until all the cabbage is just brown and kind of mushed together. but you can hurt yourself. It is so delicious. So if you want to try that, it's similar to what I'm doing. You're just going to cook it a really, really long time until there's just not a whole lot left of that cabbage, and it takes on a beautiful brown color. One of the things that is known in South Louisiana from the Cajun families is they would, whenever they see a brand new baby or just a really cute little child, they'll say, "Mon petit chou," and that means little cabbage. All right, we're going to turn that fire up. We're going to brown this a little bit. And once it gets kind of brown on all sides, I'll just keep turning it and turning it. What I'll do is I'll add a little bit of water to it, put the lid, and then we're going to steam it. That's the smothering part. All right, we're going to turn that fire up. We're going to brown this a little bit. And once it gets kind of brown on all sides, I'll just keep turning it and turning it. What I'll do is I'll add a little bit of water to it, put the lid, and then we're going to steam it. That's the smothering part. Now I'm going to salt it. I'm not going to go heavy on the salt for two reasons. Number one, we have bacon grease, but also before the cabbage is able to wilt down, it looks like it has a lot more volume because of all the air. But once it begins to take on the moisture actually it's going to cook out and it's going to have like a moisture in the bottom, it's going to flatten down and you're not going to have nearly as much cabbage as it first appears. And that's true with pretty much any kind of green, like a mustard green, a turnip green. I always tell people, wait till it cooks down a little bit or just salt it lightly. And then I love garlic, so I'm not going to go light on my garlic. And fresh black pepper. If you have white pepper, excellent, white pepper. And even a little bit of a ginger, if you like ginger, is good in your cabbage. Now, the only oil that I have in here is the actual bacon lard. And that residue that's on the bottom, the sticky bottom from my bacon has come off of the bottom of the pan really good. And you can even see it getting on the vegetable. And that's not a browning yet, that's just from the bacon, but we will actually brown it. I can go ahead and chop up my bacon. You can use your hands, it's just a little bit greasy, but I like to use my shears in my kitchen. One day I'll make you some homemade refried beans, and actually I'll cut my bacon up before I cook it, and I'll cut it up real small like this, and I'll just stir it until it's really, really crunchy. And I'll fry my refried beans in my bacon bits. I'm going to stop a second and stir that cabbage. When my potatoes are boiling nicely, I'm going to give them a stir too. All right, that's looking good. Just stir those potatoes. I'm going to turn those up a bit. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put this bacon in here. Now, if you want more bacon, go for it. This is about a half a pound. Okay, we're going to let this brown just a little bit longer. I want it to be brown on the bottom of the cabbage, like a little bit brown on all sides. And then once it gets brown like that, we'll add our water and put our lid on it. And then it won't have to cook very long, maybe 15 minutes, and it'll be ready to eat. So we'll let this cook a few more minutes, and when we come back, we'll get those mashed potatoes going for you and finish up this cabbage, and we'll be ready to plate up our meatloaf. Be right back. Okay, these potatoes are done, so it's time to strain those and we'll get those mashed up. Now, I'm not going to salt them yet because remember I salted my water pretty good, but I am going to go ahead and add some black pepper. This is about a half a cup of sour cream. This is heavy whipping cream, not half and half. I'm going to put a little bit of that. That's what, maybe a tablespoon. And I'm going to put about a half a block of butter in there. And now all we have to do is old-fashioned potato masher. And I can go add a little bit more cream. That's going to help me to stir them and get them blended with that masher, because without the blender doing it for me, they are a little bit thicker. All right, while that's, let me check my cabbage real quick. Okay, yeah, that brownness, I want you to see that. So we'll jump ship for a second. See how good and brown that cabbage is getting? That's exactly what you want. You can even see the bottom of the pan. That's from all the bacon fat and the sugar caramelizing out of the onions and the cabbage. That's what's going to give you that wonderful flavor in your smothered cabbage. Okay, so all together, I would say that's probably 1/4 of a cup, maybe a little bit more of heavy whipping cream. Oh my God. I could just like stop what I'm doing right now. This is such a comfort food, and eat these mashed potatoes and just not worry about the rest of it. But then I'd say the same thing about the cabbage, right? Okay, I'm gonna put my lid on this. Now what we're gonna do is we've got our cabbage ready. I'm gonna look at it one more time, toss it. It looks really good. You can actually eat it just like this if you wanted to. But I am gonna smother it a little bit because that is how my husband likes it. And most surely you want to spoil him as much as possible. You know, he's out working hard for our family, and I love for him to walk in the door and set a hot plate of food on the table and make him feel like he's really appreciated, because he is. Okay, so I'm gonna put a little water. That good sizzle is gonna get that drippings off the bottom. And I'll taste it in just a minute to make sure it's salty enough. Okay, now that our meatloaf is done, let's check that cabbage and see if it's salty enough. And if it is, it's time to eat. I want to make sure and get a piece of cabbage that doesn't have the bacon on it, because the bacon will not allow me to really get a true flavor. And that is hot. You can use a little bit of salt. Not a lot. Okay, so our cabbage is done. That looks wonderful. We know our mashed potatoes already taste wonderful. So now it's time to plate everything and see how well we've done on our cheese stuffed meatloaf. That cheese will kind of stick a little bit on the sides. Okay, that looks wonderful. And you can see the cheese that's inside the meatloaf. That's that good provolone. And our mashed potatoes, homemade, a little bit chunky. And you saw that cream and butter I put in here. My mama would actually put another pat of butter right on top. But we're not gonna do that because we already have plenty of fat in here. Now I'm really not gonna eat all this because I did have company come in and they're gonna eat it, but I am gonna taste out of it, so let's see how good it is. I've already tasted the cabbage. I gotta taste these again. Just because I knew how good they were. Now it's time for the meatloaf. Remember my husband had asked me not to make this anymore after I did the cornflakes one? That's so good. Okay, so now we have cabbage, mashed potatoes, and our meatloaf. Okay, we've already talked about the meaning behind cabbage, mashed potatoes, and meatloaf, and how we could tie that into our Easter story. Our food for thought is a quote that said, "Eating bread without hope is the same as starving daily." So make sure that whenever you feed your family, always give them a ray of hope. And the word mashed potatoes, cabbage, and meatloaf, when you put those together, you can find some kind of story, like the Easter story, that will always give us hope. Thanks so much for tuning in, and join us next time for more Dishing It Out, Louisiana style.